The key to awakening the elixir plant into a real relic medicine. Zufu was a wise man from China, one of the people ordered by Emperor Qin to look for an elixir of immunity. Zufu convinced Emperor Qin that he would get the elixir from Shan's. Emperor Qin sent thousands of troops accompanied Zufu with his treasures. But Zufu who left never returned. There are several myths that say that Zufu became a king in a distant land, but there has never been a myth about him getting the elixir. But the elixir is always associated with Zufu. Heian and Yu Jiha, who were at the subway station, Xiaoju Heian said that he had to meet someone here, but Yu Jiha didn't know why they were always in strange places when they were about to start something. They both saw a homeless person lying there. Xiaoju Heian, who saw that, smiled and suddenly pulled the person up from his sleep. Yu Jiha thought that Xiaoju Heian was beating him up. That person benched there and looked at the person who woke him up. Meanwhile, Yu Jiha, who knew Edward, was very surprised to see him sleeping at the subway station. Xiaoju Heian mocked Edward, who was now living his life as homeless. Edward certainly doesn't accept it because the person who made him what he is today is Xiaoju Heian. Xiaoju Heian defends himself if he has found the British Prime Minister, but Edward is angry because Xiaoju Heian sabotages Kira's relic. Had Edward was angry with him because Xiaoju Heian had gotten him fired and was currently hiding himself so that Kira wouldn't find him. But Xiaoju Heian made an offer to Edward if he would help Edward with condition that Edward had to give him information. Xiaoju Heian asked about the Zufu relic, but Edward stupidly pretended not to know. Everything went according to Xiaoju Heian's plan because first CEO Quan got the relic. This is from Edward. Wasn't going to call Kira to report Edward, but Edward stopped her and he said that Edward had sold it to Kira. Xiaoju Heian was confused about why Kira needed the relic to collect the children. Seeing Edward acting, it's strange that Xiaoju Heian knows that now he is hiding the truth. Xiaoju Heian is trying to approach Edward more gently now. Edward, by saying if Xiaoju Heian will help Edward and make him rich without having to submit to the Kira. Edward, who was tempted by the persuasion of Xiaoju Heian, was willing to listen to the explanation of Xiaoju Heian about why he needed the relic Zufu to perfect the relic medicine that he would produce, and explained that Edward would get very much profit from selling the relic medicine. After finishing explaining it, Xiaoju Heian confirmed again if Edward would be tempted by his offer. Xiaoju Heian was not lying when he said that Edward would gain a lot of profit by selling relic drugs, because in the future relic syndrome will be one of the causes of relic drug sales soaring. Not only that, by using relic drugs, then Xiaoju Heian can help people while earning his money. A plane was seen taking off. The plane that turned out to belong to Irene was carrying Xiaoju Heian and his friends along with the guards assigned by George to guard Irene. Yu Jiha also whispered to Xiaoju Heian about the guards who were here, but Xiaoju Heian asked the guards not to interfere in her business. When the guards flattered Xiaoju Heian, Irene looked embarrassed. Xiaoju Heian was happy that they did not interfere in her business. After getting information from Edward that the relic was in Ghana and Kira looked like she was doing business there, but Edward said that there was something wrong with Kira's business. No guards were dispatched even though it was about the tomb. Kira looked like she was keeping this business a secret. Xiaoju Heian began to understand what Edward said about Kira and became very interested in seeing her in person. Xiaoju Heian had arrived in Ghana. He was spying on a woman in a short red dress who looked like one of Kira's soldiers. Seeing them in front of the casino, Xiaoju Heian moved towards the casino to get the money and the relic, and told Irene and her guards to wait in front. But Irene was ordered to help her from outside, and using her powers after Xiaoju Heian gave the signal, Irene happily agreed to Xiaoju Heian's request. Seo Ju Hyun and Yu Jiha entered the casino, and right after Seo Ju Hyun entered, he saw his surroundings filled with Kira's subordinates. Seo Ju Hyun patted one of the people there. Seo Ju Hyun asked her to step aside and said that she would beat that woman. The red-haired woman belittled Seo Ju Hyun, who challenged her, but Seo Ju Hyun ignored her and smiled at the woman. And now that Seo Ju Hyun was playing with that woman, Seo Ju Hyun looked carefully at all the objects that were the places where they hid their cheating by using the relic they hid there. But Seo Ju Hyun just looked at it with a lopsided smile and promised to make them feel a tremendous misfortune now. What is Seo Ju Hyun planning? And what does Seo Ju Hyun really want from this game? The sight of Seo Ju Hyun winning the card game again and again made the woman who was her opponent a little panicked because she kept losing to Seo Ju Hyun, while Seo Ju Hyun just smiled at their losing faces. Seo Ju Hyun also said to the confused woman and exposed her cheating by taking the silver coin that was the relic that caused the woman to always win the game, which of course made the woman panic because she had been caught. Seo Ju Hyun found out about the woman's relic that was now in her hands, and explained about the relic to the woman, which made the woman a little scared because her trick was exposed. But unfortunately, the woman's relic did not work because it was covered by Irene's power, which made everyone there get bad luck except for Yu Jiha and Seo Ju Hyun. Irene is getting better at using her powers because now she can control and target people. The woman was visibly upset with Seo Ju Hyun because from the beginning Seo Ju Hyun knew about the relic. The woman had no choice but to admit her defeat and give Seo Ju Hyun the bet money. But Seo Ju Hyun stood up and asked the woman to pay for cheating on her. Seo Ju Hyun also asked for more money, which of course made the woman angry, but Seo Ju Hyun threatened them by sticking his relic sword into the table. Seo Ju Hyun made an offer to them if the woman could replace her money with a relic that could collect children and asked for information about Kira's plans. The woman was naturally very angry after knowing Seo Ju Hyun's intentions, but before she could act suddenly, her stomach became painful. Seo Ju Hyun, who saw that, was also a little surprised because she didn't do anything now, and after knowing the source of the pain felt by the woman, which turned out to be Irene's actions, Seo Ju Hyun sighed. But in contrast to Irene, who lost control of her relic, making her power come out in a huge amount, Irene became a little worried because of her out-of-control relic. Back to the woman in pain. It seemed like she had given up and asked Seo Ju Hyun to stop her, but Seo Ju Hyun just acted arrogantly. Actually, he couldn't help the woman now either. The woman started to confess and gave Seo Ju Hyun a location that would be taken over by Kira. Seo Ju Hyun asked again, but it seemed that the woman could not give her much information, because only children could enter the tomb. Seo Ju Hyun, who heard it now, knew why Kira needed the relic Zufu. The woman begged to stop everything, but Seo Ju Hyun smiled when she did not know how to stop the attack. Seo Ju Hyun instead opened a relic that made Yu Jiha look at it with a difficult-to-interpret gaze. Now, Yu Jiha thinks that they are the villains, but Seo Ju Hyun denies it and says that he only did what was needed. And after they walked away, a notification window appeared in front of him, giving him a new title, Bastard Extortionist, which made him get a bad impression from the relic, and getting help from the evil relic. Seo Ju Hyun, who couldn't find Irene, now had a bad feeling. He then picked up his cell phone to call Irene. But before his cell phone was answered, he heard Irene's bodyguard calling for him. The bodyguard said that he had lost Irene. The bodyguard then reported that Irene looked very painful, and when he was going to help her, Irene pushed him and ran away. When the bodyguard tried to chase her, Irene moved so fast that he lost Irene. Seo Ju Hyun, with his plan, asked one person to stand guard here in case Irene returned and the others were looking for Irene. The three of them agreed and split up to look for Irene. Meanwhile, with Seo Ju Hyun, he did not know how he should find Irene in a vast place like this. And when Seo Ju Hyun thought of using his relic, he just remembered that his relic was now in the hotel, and for a moment he thought of feeling the aura released by Irene. Seo Ju Hyun was silent to focus on feeling the relic aura coming out of Irene. After a while later, Seo Ju Hyun found out the location of Irene and ran in the direction where he felt the aura he felt earlier. The aura stopped at a motel far from the hotel they rented. Because he felt something was wrong, Seo Ju Hyun also asked one of the motel guards if he saw Irene. And fortunately, Seo Ju Hyun, the guard, seemed to know where Irene was now. He said if Irene came here running and asked the guard for alcohol. Finally, the guard gave him a room with alcohol for Irene. Now Seo Ju Hyun had gotten the key to Irene's room and opened it slowly. And when Seo Ju Hyun entered the room, he saw Irene lying on the bed with several empty alcohol bottles and looked like she was hugging something. Seo Ju Hyun then approached Irene carefully and cleaned up the scattered alcohol. Seo Ju Hyun could not understand why the risk received by Irene was so strange. She then stayed for a while looking at all the bottles of alcohol in front of her and intended to let Irene fall asleep on the bed. Seo Ju Hyun approached Irene slowly, but when Seo Ju Hyun stroked Irene's hair, she woke up, making Seo Ju Hyun surprised. Irene, who saw Seo Ju Hyun, became very happy and strongly pulled Seo Ju Hyun into her arms. While Seo Ju Hyun, who was unprepared for it, had to pull and hold her body so as not to fall on Irene below her. Irene, who was drunk coupled with her risk, became very strong, and with one move she reversed her position until now Irene was on top of Seo Ju Hyun. And suddenly Irene kissed Seo Ju Hyun, who was under her. After kissing Seo Ju Hyun, Irene looked at Seo Ju Hyun's face with a happy smile and fell asleep on Seo Ju Hyun, who was still surprised by everything. After that, a notification window appeared saying that if risk Irene this time was that she wanted to kiss Seo Ju Hyun. Seo Ju Hyun, who saw the notification window, became very upset and surprised. He did not expect that risk Irene this time was his lips. Seo Ju Hyun cursed the crow that did not tell him from the beginning and made him have to experience such a surprise. Seo Ju Hyun could not help but accept everything. What will Seo Ju Hyun do now? How will Irene react when she wakes up from her sleep later? There was a voice of someone who was upset because of his risk. The voice came from Kara, who was talking to her subordinates about the people who had been blacklisted. Her subordinates reported that the Seo Ju Hyun team had moved, and now they were in Ghana using the Holton family's private jet. Kara thought back about Irene, who was part of the Seo Ju Hyun team. Kara also asked for a report if something happened in Ghana now. Her subordinates also reported that some of the people sent to Ghana had mental illnesses and were arrested by the local police. Kara, who heard the report, became upset because of Seo Ju Hyun's actions. Kara did not know why Seo Ju Hyun went to Ghana to take her relic, which she didn't even need because it was not a combat-type relic. Kara seemed to be thinking about something now, while she did not want to attack using her relic again like last time, which ended up only hurting herself because Seo Ju Hyun was able to escape from her relic. But Kara had other plans, and this time she would only see how far Seo Ju Hyun would help the Holton family. Meanwhile, in a car driven directly by Seoju Hyun was seen Yoo Ji-ha, who was still upset with Seoju Hyun because he did not contact him directly shortly after Seoju Hyun found Irene and instead slept with Irene there. Because Yoo Ji-ha did not know how long to stop looking for Irene yesterday. But Seoju Hyun only reasoned that she had something unexpected last night. Seoju Hyun said that someone did not let go of her hug last night, and strangely that person became so strong with her risk that Seoju Hyun could not reach her cell phone last night. Meanwhile, Irene, who was in the back seat of Irene, was being lectured by the guard to stay away from alcohol, which Irene only answered casually. And the car driven by Seoju Hyun has arrived in front of a tomb that looks like a mountain of rocks. A notification window appears in front of Seoju Hyun saying that the tomb has been claimed by others and only small children are allowed to enter there. Seoju Hyun, who sees the notification window, does not understand why Kara only took the relic and did not destroy the tomb. Seoju Hyun thoughtlessly drove his car into the tomb area, and as he got closer to the entrance of the tomb, Seoju Hyun asked Yoo Ji-ha to give him a low-tier relic. Yoo Ji-ha, who knew what Seoju Hyun meant, he thought if Seoju Hyun would blow it up again, and after Seoju Hyun got a relic with a low tier, he immediately threw it away, and immediately an explosion occurred there, making a large hole. Meanwhile, Seoju Hyun pointed his car right at the big hole he made. Without thinking, he hit the gas hard and took his car into the tomb. And of course, because the road was uneven and steep, everyone in the car could only scream and hold on to their lives. Seoju Hyun, who saw everyone protesting to him, just smiled and innocently continued to drive his car down the tomb until they reached the bottom. And the car safely reached the bottom. As soon as the car stopped, everyone except Seoju Hyun was relieved that they didn't have to die because of a silly cause. When Seoju Hyun got off, he got a notification window if he could use ordinary objects because the tomb had been resolved. Seoju Hyun was able to use her cell phone even though she was in the tomb now. Meanwhile, Yoo Ji-ha, who was looking forward, was shocked by what he saw. Seoju Hyun followed Yoo Ji-ha's direction of view, and he saw something shocking. There was a vast underground tea plantation. Small children were working in the tea plantation. They looked like they were hypnotized by something because everything looked strange, and a notification window reappeared in front of Seoju Hyun saying that the children had been controlled by the relic Zufu, and they were ordered to harvest the tea leaves in the plantation. Seoju Hyun said that this tea plantation was made by the relic Shenong, a human who has a head resembling a cow, and the person who made this tea plantation is Shenong from Chinese mythology. At first, Shenong made tools for gardening and ate all kinds of grass, separating it into medicinal herbs and poisonous grass. It is said that someone who is poisoned by the grass is cured by chewing the tea leaves. Yoo Ji-ha also asked about the relic Zufu. Now Seoju Hyun knows what really happened here. This tomb was originally made by the relic Shenong, and Kara, who explored this tomb, found a vast tea plantation, and because she wanted to use this tea plantation, she did not take the relic that was in this tomb. Kara chose to harvest all the tea leaves, and because there was a condition where only children were allowed to enter, she used the relic Zufu to attract children and hire them for free. Seoju Hyun asked his team to split up and look for the relic Zufu among the tea plantations. Seoju Hyun also thought of taking the relic Shenong if he could do it. But while Seoju Hyun was thinking, he heard a scream from Yoo Ji-ha, who was attacked by the little boy there. And immediately Seoju Hyun looked the other way. He saw the little boy staring at him with glowing eyes. Seoju Hyun, who saw that, looked back at the little boy with her dominance, making the little boy scared when he met Seoju Hyun. Shortly after that, Seo-ju Hyun ordered his relic rope to catch all the children who lost consciousness and attacked his friends. It was seen that the little boy who previously attacked Uchiha was caught by the relic rope, and they all saw how easily the relic rope caught all the children employed there. Seo-ju Hyun also asked if everyone was okay, and it turned out that all of them except Uchiha were okay. But their fun didn't stop until Uchiha saw more kids in the other direction staring at them with creepy, angry looks. Will Seo-ju Hyun and his friends be able to find the Zufu relic? Will they all survive the little kids who will attack them? There were many children who were angry at them with their eyes shining. Uchiha looked terrified seeing all the children from the plantation attacking them, while Seo-ju Hyun only saw it as something very troublesome. But Seo-ju Hyun took the bright side and the possibility of the relic Zufu would come to him. Uchiha also looked painful and panicked knowing what Seo-ju Hyun would do. And the sound of a relic began to be heard in their ears. Seo-ju Hyun, who heard it, just smiled wryly. After that, Seo-ju Hyun ran and told Uchiha to get closer to Irene because Irene's relic would protect them. Meanwhile, Seo-ju Hyun ran towards the source of the aura in the tomb, and with the help of the rope relic that would bind all the children who disturbed Seo-ju Hyun, no one could escape the bondage of Seo-ju Hyun's rope relic. The relic that saw what Seo-ju Hyun did to the children became very angry with him. Seo-ju Hyun was now right where the relic was. By activating his power, Seo-ju Hyun could make the little children who were going to attack him become scared. And just below him, an earthworm was seen which turned out to be a relic. But Seo-ju Hyun, who saw the relic, ignored it, stepped on the relic, and made it scream in pain. Seo-ju Hyun picked up the relic and told one of his friends who was there to get him the bag from the car they brought earlier. While waiting for Uchiha to get the bag, Seo-ju Hyun now tried to negotiate with the relic. He knew that the relic really liked money and Seo-ju Hyun intended to buy the relic, and arrogantly the relic underestimated Seo-ju Hyun who was trying to buy it. Meanwhile, Uchiha, who had just arrived, was confused when he saw Seo-ju Hyun negotiating with the relic. In the story, it is said that Zufu received a lot of favors and left, but he never came back. Thus, he is categorized as an extortion-type relic, and in order to make a contract with him, one needs to offer him treasures. Which is the reason why Seo-ju Hyun asked for so much money from the female soldier he met earlier. And besides that, this relic had a risk that would make it take the user's money. But Seo-ju Hyun, who saw Uchiha, who didn't seem to want to deal with the relic, said that the risk that would be caused by this relic was easier to handle than other relics. And immediately Seo-ju Hyun opened his bag full of money. The relic seemed happy to see all the money in Seo-ju Hyun's bag. The relic quickly moved into the bag full of money, but the relic said that the money would not be enough. Then, with his preparations complete, Seo-ju Hyun opened another bag that was also full of money. Seo-ju Hyun was confident because the money was more than what CEO Kwon had offered to this relic. He saw the relic was counting the money. But the relic said if Kara paid more than the money given by Seo-ju Hyun. Hearing that, Seo-ju Hyun also asked how much money was offered by Kara, while Uchiha, who saw Seo-ju Hyun had just thrown away his money to get the relic, was a little worried and annoyed by him. In the end, Seo-ju Hyun gave all the expensive things she brought. Even Irene gave some land certificates belonging to her family, and finally the relic was happy because it got a lot of money. The relic also asked what help Seo-ju Hyun wanted from him, and immediately Seo-ju Hyun caught the relic and put him in a bottle that he had prepared beforehand. The relic seemed to protest what Seo Ju Hyun was doing to him now. For his first order, Seo Ju Hyun requested that the relic ask all the children there to collect the tea leaves and then remove the hypnotic effect after they finished. But the relic refused on the grounds that Relic Shenong would be angry if he did that. The relic agreed, but on the condition that Seo Ju Hyun had to pay him again. He said that the money that Seo Ju Hyun had previously given was just to form a contract with him. And now every time the relic worked he asked for his fee. Seo Ju Hyun couldn't help but agree, but the relic instead underestimated Seo Ju Hyun, which made him really angry and shook the bottle he was holding very strongly. Finally, the relic gave in and did Seo Ju Hyun's bidding, and after Relic Zufu had done his bidding, the boy worked very quickly to gather all the tea leaves they could gather. Seo Ju Hyun and the others were ready to leave now. The boy worked by gathering the tea leaves and digging them up to get the seeds of the plant very quickly. And after the boy finished, Seo Ju Hyun could not just leave the boy here. He asked the relic Zufu to give him an order so that the boy could get out of here. But the relic refused because Seo Ju Hyun had not even paid the bill for the work he did before. But after negotiating with the relic, finally Seo Ju Hyun had to increase his fee to make the relic work. Seo Ju Hyun also gave the relic to Yu Jiha to carry it. Because Seo Ju Hyun was going to take another relic that was in the tomb, he also asked Yu Jiha to get his bag so that Seo Ju Hyun could carry the relic that was useful to him. After that, there was an angry voice from another relic addressed to Seo Ju Hyun for taking away his children and tea plantation. Seo Ju Hyun, who heard the voice of the relic Shenong, just smiled happily. Seo Ju Hyun also told Irene and others to leave first with the help of the relic Zufu, who would take them out of here. Irene was worried to see Seo Ju Hyun, who would fight the relic Shenong. Yu Jiha shouted by carrying Seo Ju Hyun's bag full of relics. Seo Ju Hyun, who saw it, asked Yu Jiha to throw it. But just before the bag approached Seo Ju Hyun, there was a wall made of aura holding the bag and trapping Seo Ju Hyun in it with only the relic sword and rope he had. Seo Ju Hyun looked at the relic that trapped him. What will be the fate of Seo Ju Hyun? Will she manage to get the relic Shenong and get out safely? Yu Jiha and Irene became worried when they saw Seo Ju Hyun trapped behind the aura wall. Seo Ju Hyun asked them to leave him to retrieve the relic. The relic's voice sounded unhappy because Seo Ju Hyun underestimated him. Tree roots began to grow from the ground because of the relic's anger. The tree roots immediately tied the legs of Seo Ju Hyun, but by using his sword Seo Ju Hyun could easily free himself. Seo Ju Hyun snorted trying to and jumped away from the tree roots that were trying to catch him. Seo Ju Hyun also focused himself to see the aura of the relic Shenong, and he found the origin of the aura from behind the tea tree there. And just before Seo Ju Hyun was about to move closer, he was surprised when he felt the poison released from the relic. The relic was proud that he could make Seo Ju Hyun panic a little. But Seo Ju Hyun just smiled and took out another relic. And quickly Seo Ju Hyun used the relic to create sparks and set the plantation on fire. The fire raged, burning the entire plantation there. The relic Shenong just screamed in pain because Seo Ju Hyun burned him. Seo Ju Hyun smiled happily after he knew what he had to do, not wanting to waste the opportunity. Seo Ju Hyun ran towards where the relic Shenong was. But just before Seo Ju Hyun could make his attack, the relic made a very deep hole under Seo Ju Hyun's feet. Seo Ju Hyun, who was shocked to see the ground beneath him hollowed out so deeply, could only fall down because he did not expect the relic to hollow out the ground beneath him, while Ujiha, who saw Seoju Hien fall into the hole, could only cry out in alarm. Seoju Hien, who was still falling, was again attacked by the relic by wrapping Seoju Hien's legs with tree roots and pulling him deeper and deeper. Seoju Hien could only surrender now that he was in an unfavorable position. The ceiling of the tomb seemed to begin to collapse and fall, covering the hole where Seoju Hien was. Ujiha and Irene were worried beyond belief when she didn't see Seoju Hien anymore. Everyone panicked, but because the tomb was about to collapse, they had no choice but to save themselves, because even though they were here, they also couldn't help Seoju Hien, who was trapped by the aura wall. And finally, they left Seoju Hien and left the tomb. Back with Seoju Hien, who was still attracted by the roots that the relic used to bind his legs. Seoju Hien, who was cornered now, could only hear the relic's voice that continued to belittle him, and soon Seoju Hien was finally able to set foot again after he reached the bottom quickly. Seoju Hien freed himself from the roots wrapped around his legs. Seoju Hien, who still did not want to lose, mocked the relic, who used a sneaky way to attack him. Since Shenong was a god, then this relic was certainly an S-rank relic. Seoju Hien thought of another way to defeat it because he knew he would not be able to win against an S-rank relic with his limited relics, and facing it head-on was not something wise to do. Seoju Hien put the relic back. Shenong, who saw Seoju Hien put it back, thought that Seoju Hien would just give up. But Seoju Hien rejected the idea of giving up, and that surprised Shenong. Seoju Hien took out the relic he had, and he thought of opening a new path by using the tomb. Seoju Hien would blow up the place now and burn all the clones owned by Shenong. Of course, the relic became angry with what Seoju Hien was going to do, which he thought was very unreasonable, by just blowing up this place. The relic could not understand why Seoju Hien wanted to burn himself by blowing up this place. But Seoju Hien just smiled and said that he had another way now. Using his power, he activated the relic, and instantly the fire spread quickly, and Ujiha and others who managed to get out saw the fire soaring and destroying the tomb. After the tomb was flattened to the ground, Seoju Hien appeared from behind the dust and debris of the tomb. Seeing Seoju Hien, who managed to survive, certainly made the others happy to see him. Ujiha even thought that Seoju Hien would not survive. So did Irene, but Seoju Hien said that it was herself who closed the tomb. Irene mocked Ujiha, who became too worried about Seoju Hien's safety, and the embarrassed Ujiha could only dodge and defend himself. Seoju Hien, who heard the reason Ujiha was worried about him, gave the broken relic to Ujiha. Ujiha, who saw the relic in his hand, became a little trembling. Although Seoju Hien said that the one in his hand now was the Shenong relic, but now the relic looked like charcoal. Ujiha, who tried to protest, had to return to silence when he saw Seoju Hien, who gave him an angry look at him. And not finished with that, Seoju Hien also gave the Hammurabi relic to Ujiha. Seoju Hien invited them to leave now. She wanted to rest and take a shower because her body was very dirty. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, several people were seen fanning and playing flutes melodiously. One of the people there was also seen watering the plant pots. The neatly dressed person turned out to be Oh Seung-woo, who was treating the elixir plant with special care. Oh Seung-woo, who was a little annoyed with his work, now got a call on his cell phone. The call turned out to be from Seoju Hien. It sounded Seoju Hien, who told them all to go to New York and bring all the items there. One of the people there asked Oh Seung-woo, who just got a call from Seoju Hien. Oh Seung-woo told his subordinates that they had to move to New York, and with one order Oh Seung-woo asked his subordinates to pack up their things and take everything to New York. Will everything just go smoothly? What will Seo Ju-hyun do after he gets the Zufu and Shenong relics? At an airport somewhere, there was Seo Ju-hyun who was still asleep using his blindfold. Seo Ju-hyun woke up because Yoo Ji-ha kept waking him up. Yoo Ji-ha explained that they were almost in New York now, but Seo Ju-hyun still felt sluggish because he had just woken up. Irene came to wake up Seo Ju-hyun, who was awake, and Seo Ju-hyun, who heard there was a problem. His face became serious again. Irene couldn't contact the limousine driver. Seo Ju-hyun said that they could use another vehicle, but Irene still wanted to contact the limousine driver. The three of them were in the taxi now with Irene still trying to contact the limousine driver. Irene became worried now, but Seo Ju-hyun calmed her down, and right after that Seo Ju-hyun got a call from Oh Seung-woo on his cell phone. Seo Ju-hyun answered the call, and the first thing Seo Ju-hyun heard was the voice of Oh Seung-woo, who was panting and panicking because they were being chased by Americans who were trying to take their almond trees. Seo Ju-hyun thought that this was the work of Kara, who had been looking for information about her past. Seo Ju-hyun tried to call the relic elixir, but the relic rejected Seo Ju-hyun's call. Oh Seung-woo still continued to run with the elixir plant there, and Seo Ju-hyun also said if they had to escape and not be caught by the Americans because Seo Ju-hyun was planning something. Irene, who saw the anxiety on Seo Ju-hyun's face, asked worriedly about what happened. Seo Ju-hyun then explained that his subordinates were in trouble and told Irene if they had to come to his meeting place immediately. Seo Ju-hyun asked the taxi driver to speed up the car. Meanwhile, Irene looked sad now. Seo Ju-hyun, who heard that they had been stuck in a bad traffic situation, was surprised. Yoo Ji-ha was angry and asked the taxi driver to do something now. But of course, there was nothing the taxi driver could do with the traffic jam as bad as it was now. The situation in the taxi became chaotic with Yoo Ji-ha, who was angry and impatient. Meanwhile, Seo Ju-hyun was also upset that they would lose the relic if it continued like this. And Irene, who became scared and panicked if they could not save her parents because the relic was in danger. Shortly after that, there was a huge explosion. Seo Ju-hyun, who saw the explosion, immediately opened his window. It then made all the motorists there panic. Yoo Ji-ha asked Seo Ju-hyun if she knew anything and said that bad luck kept coming to them now. As Yoo Ji-ha looked back, he saw Irene with a scared look on her face. Irene became panicked and scared now. Seo Ju-hyun and Yoo Ji-ha tried to calm Irene, who was panicking and scared now. Several notification windows appeared informing that Irene's power became uncontrollable. Seo Ju-hyun held Irene's hand and spoke softly to calm Irene. Irene became a little calmer now thanks to Seo Ju-hyun, and after being fully awake, Irene quickly took her cell phone to call the police. But Seo Ju-hyun stopped that and said if Irene called the police, they would only be dragged into her misfortune. Seeing Irene, who was confused, Seo Ju-hyun took out a relic in his hand. Seo Ju-hyun got the relic from CEO Kwon before, but at that time he didn't have enough power to use it. But with the increase in Seo Ju-hyun's power now, he will be able to use the relic and start activating it. Meanwhile, at the place where Oh Seung-woo is still being chased by the Americans, it seems that Oh Seung-woo managed to trick them and make them lose. Oh Seung-woo, one of the people there, tried to pay them a very large profit, but Oh Seung-woo refused. One of the people there also said that Oh Seung-woo could not use English and suggested finding him a translator. Of course, that made the person who looked like the leader angry because they didn't have time to do all that, and said that they would take it forcibly from Oh Seung-woo. They also started to prepare their weapons and move forward to find the whereabouts of Oh Seung-woo. Meanwhile, Oh Seung-woo, who was hiding nearby in his strange clothes, heard everything that the people who were chasing him were talking about. And when they thought the situation had improved, a policeman came because he got a report about 3 strange people wearing clothes like what Oh Seung-woo and his subordinates were wearing. And quickly, Oh Seung-woo pushed the policeman to the ground, then left quickly away from the policeman. Oh Seung-woo regretted his idea of being civilized like a nun that ended up becoming a police fugitive. And as they continued to run, the person who chased him earlier found Oh Seung-woo and his subordinates. Oh Seung-woo, who saw that the person who chased him was carrying a gun, became panicked and surprised now. Their leader told them to shoot Oh Seung-woo, but one of the subordinates of the pursuer seemed hesitant to shoot because there was a policeman behind them. The leader still told his subordinates to shoot Oh Seung-woo and said that Kara would take care of the rest. Oh Seung-woo didn't know what he should do now, but suddenly the policeman chasing them disappeared along with the Americans. Oh Seung-woo, who saw Seo-ju Hyun coming, asked why the people had disappeared, and Seo-ju Hyun casually said that he did it all, but it seemed that the explanation from Seo-ju Hyun was not acceptable to them because they seemed to be still confused about what Seo-ju Hyun meant. In a place in Mongol, the people chasing Oh Seung-woo were surprised and confused when now they were in the middle of nowhere. The relic used by Seo-ju Hyun called Invitation from a Lonely Deity. This relic was born because of the concept of kamikaze. At that time, people believed that the deity was responsible when someone disappeared. Oh Seung-woo also gave the tree relic to Seo-ju Hyun. Seo-ju Hyun was happy when he saw the relic in good condition, and will start his plan now to awaken the true power of the relic. What kind of power does Seo-ju Hyun want to awaken exactly? How will Seo-ju Hyun do it? In a warehouse scene, Seo-ju Hyun took out the relic Zufu, which was still in the jar. When the relic Zufu saw the elixir plant, he could feel if the elixir plant was part of him. Seo-ju Hyun was happy because the relic Zufu could guess it correctly. And suddenly, Seo-ju Hyun pulled the elixir tree out of the pot, making the relic scream in surprise because Seo-ju Hyun suddenly pulled it. The relic looked unhappy and asked Seo-ju Hyun to let go because the relic could feel his dominance aura. Oh Seung-woo, who saw Seo-ju Hyun just pull out the relic tree, was surprised and asked Seo-ju Hyun to treat it more carefully. But Seo-ju Hyun didn't want Oh Seung-woo to worry too much about what he did to the relic because losing a few leaves wasn't a big deal. The tree relic did not accept being treated like that by Seo-ju Hyun and asked for his servant back. In the other hand, Seo-ju Hyun opened the jar containing the Zufu relic and gave it to the tree relic. The Zufu relic looked happy because he felt he had found his soulmate. The tree relic screamed and said disgustedly to the Zufu relic that was in its roots. The tree relic asked to keep the Zufu relic away from it, but Seo-ju Hyun ignored it and added fertilizer and soil in the pot. After that, Seo-ju Hyun raised his hand to use his dominance on the relic. Seo-ju Hyun was seen using his power directly on the relic, making them scream in pain because of the power of Seo-ju Hyun. And after finishing with Seo-ju Hyun's dominance, several fruits began to grow on the tree until it filled the tree. Seo-ju Hyun said that the fruit that grew from the tree would be able to heal Irene's parents, and all they needed to do was give the fruit now. Irene seemed very happy to hear those words because she could finally heal her sick parents. And by taking a taxi followed by a truck carrying a tree behind it, they had arrived at Irene's mansion. Several people were seen lying on the ground. As soon as the taxi stopped, Seo-ju Hyun got off with a look of confusion about what had happened in this mansion. Not only that, some of the walls of the mansion seemed to be peeling off and some fences seemed to have been destroyed. Irene was worried and afraid now, while Yoo Ji-ha was also asking the same thing about what had happened in this mansion. They walked into the mansion with Seo-ju Hyun leading them, and as soon as they entered, Seo-ju Hyun could see George lying bleeding on the floor of the mansion. Irene, who saw her brother lying on the floor, screamed in alarm. Seo-ju Hyun approached George's body, and when he turned his body, there was a fatal wound on George's body that was still bleeding from it. Seo-ju Hyun, who knew that George was injured because someone used a relic to hurt George, asked who had done all this, but George said that those people had captured his parents and put them in a painting. Hearing that, Seo-ju Hyun asked Yoo Ji-ha to check the room of Irene's parents, and quickly Yoo Ji-ha ran to their room. Right after that, there was a ringing phone that caught the attention of Seo-ju Hyun. There was a voice that was familiar to the ears of Seo-ju Hyun. The voice from the phone sounded like talking to Irene about her family who had been kidnapped. Seo-ju Hyun got up from his seat and approached the phone that said if Irene's parents were alive now and were in their hands. The voice from the phone threatened Irene to follow all his orders if he wanted his parents to live. The voice again threatened Irene to make a decision quickly before it was too late, and after that, the phone was hung up. Oh Seung-woo, who heard the voice that threatened Irene, asked who exactly the woman was. Seo-ju Hyun knew that this was Kira's doing because the only person who would do this was her. Yoo Ji-ha returned after from Irene's parents' room. He said that the room was empty without Irene's parents lying on the bed. Irene, who heard that, fell to the floor with her face showing a look of surprise and fear. Irene became panicked before she was finally tagged by Seo-ju Hyun, who said that they had a solution to this problem. Seo-ju Hyun then picked some fruit from the relic tree and asked George to eat it, but George looked desperate with his life. But Seo-ju Hyun forced George to eat the fruit by giving it directly to George's mouth. George, who ate the fruit, felt an overwhelming bitter taste in his mouth, while those who saw it hoped that the fruit given by Seo-ju Hyun could heal George. Immediately a golden light emerged from George's wound and closed it quickly. George, who saw his wound no longer hurt and healed, tried to digest what actually happened, but Irene quickly ran and hugged George, who was still sitting on the floor. George was happy and asked Irene not to worry about him, who was now fine because he still had parents to worry about. But the words of Seo-ju Hyun made them confused. Seo-ju Hyun said if their parents were not held as hostages by Kira. It then made George surprised and asked Seo-ju Hyun to tell the truth because George saw with his own eyes if his parents had been sucked into a painting. Seo-ju Hyun explained that what was actually sucked into the painting was a doppelganger. George still didn't understand and was confused, while Yoo Ji-ha just smiled happily. Seo-ju Hyun actually told Yoo Ji-ha to make replicas of both parents, Irene and George, before they left for Ghana. George was furious with Yoo Ji-ha for making him waste his time to keep replicas of his own parents. Seo-ju Hyun calmed George and asked George to let Yoo Ji-ha go. Irene, who heard that, became relieved because there was no need for her to worry now. Irene also asked how Seo-ju Hyun would carry out his plan this time. Seo-ju Hyun also recalled her past where she saw Irene, who was very different in her previous life, and that's why Seo-ju Hyun assumed that someone had used Irene and exploited her weakness. Seeing that Irene's parents were affected by relic syndrome, it would be very easy for someone to use them as hostages. Besides that, their disease progressed very quickly. So Seo-ju Hyun decided to make replicas of Irene's parents with the help of Yoo Ji-ha because leaving them alone would be too risky. but Seo Hyun chose not to explain everything and said that he was just being cautious. Seo Hyun also explained that someone had deliberately worsened the illness of Irene's parents, and that's why Seo Hyun didn't want to leave them alone when she knew that someone was trying to take advantage of this situation. But George was still annoyed that he wasn't told earlier by Seo Hyun if he was going to carry out a plan like this. Seo Hyun said that with less people knowing the plan would run more naturally, and Seo Hyun invited them to meet Irene's parents to give her medicine and intend to do something to Kara, who had done evil to all of them. Where exactly is Seo Hyun hiding Irene's parents? And what will Seo Hyun do to get back at Kara?